How safe is Japan, really? Everybody always says there's no crime to be had.
Theft, violent crime, despair. Things that I've not really experienced in 10 years living in Japan. Well, maybe not despair. I mean, the price of Family Mart fried chicken's gone up 18 yen this month alone. That is the real despair. That is the real crime. Look, you probably don't need me to tell you that, statistically speaking, Japan is one of the safest countries in the world, with amongst the lowest rates of violent crime and theft. And in fact, this year, Japan hit a post-war low for the 7th year running for reported crimes domestically. Now, I'd be incredibly naive to tell you that Japan is some kind of utopia. You know, there's a reason there are women-only train carriages. And in recent years, there have been some highly publicised crimes that have shocked the nation and triggered headlines around the world. And on a slightly more bizarre note, this week 2 monkeys went on a rampage around Yamaguchi Prefecture, injuring over 60 people in scenes that sound like something out of 28 Days Later. But ruthless monkeys aside, for the most part, everyday life in Japan is very safe. Many people leave their front doors unlocked. It's not uncommon to see people leaving their worldly possessions on the coffee shop table when they go to the restroom, which, coming from the UK, always seems like a colossal act of bravery. If you drive through the countryside, you'll see these unmanned stands just selling fruit and vegetables. You just deposit the money in a coin box and take it away, and there's nobody there. There's a level of trust in everyday society that feels largely absent back in the UK, which I think is very sad. Honestly, I think the only time I felt threatened in Japan was last week when I walked past an ice cream shop with a very direct and intimidating slogan. I love my cows. You will too. Love them. Love my cows. But this atmosphere of safety and trust can give you a false sense of security if you come here as a tourist. And today I want to tell you a story, and unfortunately it's not a nice story like The Wizard of Oz or Harry Potter and the Goblet of Secrets. This is the story of a couple that came to Japan on their honeymoon and walked away with $6,000 of credit card debt and probably not a very good image of the country either. And when Japan finally reopens to tourists sometime in the not so distant future for the first time in 2 to 3 billion years, I don't want anyone to go through this ever again. You know, I feel a huge sense of regret for not talking about this sooner, because I might have been able to prevent this viewer from enduring the nightmare that they went through. And I think one reason I've never discussed it is because Japan is safe. I didn't want to come across like I was scaremongering, but time and again I've heard horror stories like this. Hopefully in this video we can make sure you don't end up abroad in a scam. Abroad in a scam. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Oh, Jesus. But before you come to Japan, make sure you don't get scammed online either. Up until a few years ago, I didn't even know what a VPN was. Now when I'm online, it feels wrong to surf the net without one. Like driving a car without a seatbelt, or flying an airplane without fingers. ExpressVPN has been my go-to VPN for the last 2 years. So when they contacted me asking to sponsor an Abroad in Japan video, I said yes. What took you so long? As someone who's always on the go and reliant on public Wi-Fi when I'm travelling, it's worryingly easy for others to connect to the same network and steal data, passwords, account logins, or even credit card details. ExpressVPN helps me secure my connection, no matter the public Wi-Fi that I use. Make ExpressVPN your first line of defence and encrypt your every move online. Encrypted, what I just did. Admittedly, when I first got ExpressVPN, it wasn't for security reasons, but to access websites back home in the UK that you couldn't get in Japan. For example, while you can't watch Studio Ghibli movies on Netflix in Japan, you can in the UK, meaning I can now watch My Neighbour Totoro, and not the horrific fan art edition either. Find out how you can get 3 months free on ExpressVPN by clicking the link in the description box below at expressvpn.com/abroadjapan. Now, as a tourist in Japan, there's only 2 real scams you need to be aware of. One of them is quite serious, this one where they lost $6,000. The other one seems almost trivial in comparison, is more of an inconvenience, I'd say. And today I'll explain both using stories kindly sent in by viewers that have experienced them firsthand. The scam you need to worry about the most is in Tokyo, and to be more specific, in the districts of Shinjuku, Roppongi, and to a lesser extent Ueno and Shibuya as well. And the one thing all these areas have in common is historically they're very touristy places. The story we're going to read out today is actually in Kabukicho. I don't want to put people off Kabukicho though. It is a very cool place. The food's amazing, the nightlife's awesome, the atmosphere is incredible. And in fact, this set is kind of modelled on Kabukicho. I love it. I should have just filmed all my videos there instead of building this ridiculously elaborate set. But I was there only a week ago. It's not an inherently dangerous place, and it's changed a heck of a lot in the last decade. It's far more gentrified now, and there's a lot more hotels, and so there's a good chance you'll stay there if you do come to Tokyo. But there's one rule you need to follow if you do go there, and that is never ever ever follow one of the touts into a bar. And if you follow that rule, you can basically switch the video off now and have a nice day. Unfortunately, a lot of people do follow the street touts. They're pretty nice people, they're very engaging and good at what they do, and they're there to get you off the street and into a bar. And you might be thinking, well, oh yeah, it's obvious, don't follow them. That's a golden rule for not just Japan, but many countries. But I think a lot of people get lulled into that false sense of security, given that it is Japan, given that it is an inherently safe country. Now, the touts that target foreigners specifically are actually foreigners themselves. They're not Japanese, they're Nigerian guys that have been given visas to come over and basically kind of do this and work for these organisations in the area. They have two very good skills. Number one, they're very friendly and engaging. And number two, they're very persistent. Once you start speaking to someone, you can't get rid of them. And it gets very difficult. And if you're none the wiser to the scam, either you or your group of friends might say, yeah, who doesn't want free drinks? I'd love a free drink, let's go. And away you go to a bar that's typically hidden several stories up in one of the buildings down that very neon lit district. Now, once you get inside one of these bars, you are, for lack of a better phrase, pretty screwed. You are going to get charged extortionate prices for drinks. 3, 4, 5 times what you're expected to pay. When the bill comes, the odds are you're going to query it. You're going to be like, no, I'm not paying $200 for what was $20, $30 of drinks. And it's at this point you won't be allowed to leave the bar. There'll be a group of people blocking the door, basically preventing you from leaving until you either pull out the cash or a credit card. In some cases, if you don't have cash, they might take you to an ATM. They'll like frog march you to a fucking ATM and watch you get the money out. It's pretty insane. Don't think just because you've got no cash on you, you've got a magical get out of jail free card. They'll still get the money out of you somehow. And those free drinks and reasonable prices you were promised at the start of the night have gone on to become the most expensive drinks you've probably ever had. But the worrying thing is that's actually a pretty good variation of the scam. That's a less severe one than the one we're going to read out now, because it can go much worse than that. As Laura found out with her husband when she came to Japan 2 or 3 years ago for her honeymoon. She begins, so my husband and I were in Japan and started our trip in Tokyo. We were staying in Shinjuku and pre-booked the Robot Restaurant for the evening on Sunday. Robot Restaurant used to be this kind of place where people dressed up like robots danced around. It was fun, I guess, but I think it's closed now, COVID reasons. We had a few beers during the show and got chatting to a few English couples who sat near us. The show finished and we all agreed with the other couples to carry on for a few drinks together, leaving the Robot Restaurant, and we decided we should find a karaoke bar. We wandered the streets in Kabukicho for just a couple of minutes before one of our group, neither me nor my husband, got chatting to a tout on the street. I didn't hear the conversation, so I don't know what was offered, but in any event, we found ourselves in a bar and were taken to a karaoke room and were brought several trays of drinks for the group. My husband sang a bit of karaoke, as did the others in the group, but then at that point, we don't remember much at all. We blacked out. Next thing I knew, it was several hours later and we were in the same bar but in a different room. And a hostess girl was basically sat on top of me, and I looked over and my husband was in exactly the same situation. Let's just say these girls were extremely handsy and doing stuff to us without any consent. I also recall the street tout coming over several times with trays of drinks. I remember being in a totally zombie-like state as I saw my husband kissing a hostess girl, and I had pretty much zero reaction, so definitely confident we were drugged for that reason. If I was just drunk, I'd have been angry or upset to see something like this, but instead I was weirdly emotionless. Right, pause for a minute. This is insane. Imagine watching your husband, your new husband, kissing some hostess girl right next to you and feeling nothing. They've clearly been drugged, and this is something that some of the bars do. They put like sleeping tablets and other things in the drink to basically knock you out and make you in this sort of vulnerable state. And once the people in the bar do this, they've basically got, free reign with your credit card, with your wallet. Laura continues, After that, all I recall was being in a taxi, trying to get back to our hotel. I had no cash in my purse and had to pay for the taxi on my credit card. Miraculously, we made it back to the hotel. Next morning, we woke up and I looked in my purse to find my debit card was gone, which prompted me to check my online banking. A transaction appeared for around $2,500. My husband checked his account and he had lost the same amount of money, roughly the exact same amount. Then I checked my credit card and there was another transaction for around $1,000. In total, between the two of us, we had just over $6,000 gone from our accounts. $6,000 for the worst night out ever. After a bit more searching, and as the most horrendous hangover in my life wore off, we realised my bank card was in fact in my husband's wallet. One of his cards was in my purse, which makes me think the staff had probably just helped themselves, swiped them, and then put them in the wrong wallets. Next day, we reported to the police, who weren't particularly interested and told us to take it up with our banks. The banks weren't interested, as they said it was an authorised transaction and we'd have to take it up with the bar, which we obviously had no intention of doing, since at this point we knew it was probably run by a criminal organisation. I don't even know the name of the bar. It comes up on our bank statements as Primetime Bar, but Google just brings up nothing from that name in Shinjuku. So yeah, that's it basically. We couldn't wait to leave Tokyo and now we're in debt, unfortunately. Never ever follow a street towel, she ends the message with. This is without a doubt one of the worst real-life horror stories I've heard of anyone who's ever travelled to Japan. You might be sceptical and think, well, they're clearly exaggerating, it can't be that amount of money. But I've heard this story dozens of times from viewers, from listeners of the podcast. This is probably the highest amount of money I've heard, but everything in this story, there's nothing new there. This is something that happens in Tokyo. You need to be careful of it. Never follow a street towel, always be careful. And hopefully you won't ever have to endure what Laura and her husband went through on this occasion. A few years ago, I did this crazy, maniacal 2,000-kilometre cycle across Japan, and on day 3, I was in Niigata Prefecture. Beautiful area, lots of rice fields, nothing going on, incredibly remote. And all of a sudden, I saw this car up ahead. I was cycling along, I saw a car, and it was a car that had driven past me about a mile back. So I was a little bit worried at first. I was like, oh crap, you know, have I done something? Has something gone wrong here? And there was a sort of middle-aged woman by the driver's side, standing there, ushering me over, sort of waving to grab my attention, which is quite odd. You know, people don't really do that in Japan, so I thought, oh, maybe she needs help. So I pulled over on my bike and I sort of said, hello, how you doing? And she was like, you know, where are you from? What are you doing here? Why are you in Japan? The usual sort of generic questions. And I just said, oh, I'm cycling across Japan to Kagoshima, off to Niigata City today. And she said, won't you come with me to a party right now? And I was like, what? What did you say? And she was like, yeah, there's a party right now. Come along to my house with my friends. Let's have a party. And I was like, oh, I think I've got to get going right now. And she was like, no, it's gonna be amazing. There's biscuits. Don't you like biscuits? I was like, biscuits aside, I've got to get going. I've got to get cycling. And she was really persistent, right? This is quite a rare, abnormal interaction to have. But at one point she pulled out her phone and it was a photo of some very bewildered and confused foreigners just sitting on a sofa with like a cake, looking just like, why am I here? Like kind of that kind of expression. And I thought, I'm going to be like that if I say yes. In the end, the only way I could escape this bizarre interaction was to genuinely start sort of getting on my bike and walking away. At which point she was like, okay, maybe next time, here's some biscuits. And I was like, all right, biscuits, yeah, I got something out of this awkward interaction. And we did put it in the video, and a lot of viewers sort of speculated as to what was going on there when the video came out. Now, I'd like to tell you that this is some kind of elaborate biscuit scam where you get cakes and biscuits and a party, it's magic. But unfortunately, it's a little bit more sinister than that, I expect, because this isn't the first time this has happened to me, this kind of interaction. A few years ago, I was sitting in Sapporo Park, waiting just beneath the tower for Natsuki to return from another bloody smoking break.
Go fuck yourself.
Anyway, I was sitting on this bench and a middle-aged woman came over and started speaking, kind of the old generic questions, what are you doing, why are you here, why Japan? It was a fairly unremarkable conversation, but all of a sudden she pulled out this pamphlet and stuck it in my hand. And I looked at it and it was for this very unimpressive looking Buddhist kind of sect, some sort of almost cult-like looking place. And she was like, we can make you happy. And I was like, look at my face, I'm already happy. isn't it? But she was very insistent that I join her right there, right then, and we go off and learn the ways of Buddha for a reasonable price. But right then, thankfully, Natsuki turned up and she sort of got very embarrassed and ran away very quickly. But I think those two experiences were connected by the fact they were both effectively trying to get me to go to some religious meeting or some sort of cult. And they do target foreign travellers quite often. Maybe it's just to make a quick buck. Can you believe it? Religion, trying to make money, who'd have thought of it? I hate to say it, but whenever someone comes up to me now and starts talking to me in a very friendly, unusual manner, I just assume that I'm going to be dragged off to a cult. And I've always wondered what would have happened if I'd said yes. And now we know the answer, because Andrew from Australia did just that on his trip to Japan. In the winter of 2017, I was passing through Tokyo Station when I was approached by two 30-year-old women. After exchanging a few words, they immediately sprung upon me some shifty-looking pamphlets about how their brand of Buddhism would bring about world peace and happiness. I was sceptical, naturally, and refused them a number of times, but eventually my curiosity got the better of me, and I accepted. The two women took me on the train, and we arrived in what could only be described as the middle of nowhere in Tokyo. They took me into their shrine, which was nothing more than an office building situated in the middle of a quiet residential area. Bit of a red flag when the religion is just in a random office building. Before we made our way into the main prayer hall, which was on the second floor of the office block, they handed me a prayer book written in Japanese and some prayer beads. They explained to me the rules of the prayer book and instructed me in ways that I had to sit and hold the magical beads. After the explanation, they whisked me away to the front of the hall where we sat in front of a gold-plated altar. An elderly man meditated in front of the altar and began a soothing read of the Buddhist prayers. I was expected to follow along with the impassioned chants promoted by the two women keeping a close eye on me. The process took over 40 minutes as we enchanted the entire 40-page prayer book. Like, imagine this, you're just on your day out in Tokyo, on your holiday, next thing you know, you're chanting in a room for 40 minutes, holding prayer beads, and this is just, the next part is the most interesting part. The cult, it seems, turned out to be a pyramid scheme. I was taken into an initiation ceremony where a woman spoke to me in really fast Japanese. She then coerced me into signing a bunch of documents that officiated my membership into the club. The two women who took me to the session received some kind of award. It seems they got promoted for bringing me to join their questionable religion. At the end of it, the two women wanted my address and contact details as they wanted to send me things related to the cult. I gave them a fake address, and after adding them on Facebook, I immediately blocked them. They were very persistent that I should bring my friends the next time that I come. I said I definitely would, yeah, and waved them goodbye and never saw them again. Overall, it was an unforgettable experience. All the best, Andrew from Australia. Andrew there, who likes to try all the religions of the world. But again, this isn't something to be sceptical about. This is something that happens. I've heard this story dozens of times from various viewers and listeners. And if you're wondering why I've just got loads of random stories, they're from the Abroad in Japan podcast, out every Sunday and Thursday on Spotify and iTunes. I do a terrible job of plugging it, even though we haven't missed a single episode in 4 years now. But these are the two most common scams that you'll encounter. There are more. And in fact, I was in Shinjuku with Connor, CWVA, the other day. We went into a bar and the menu was in both Japanese and English. And the Japanese side was a lot more favourable than the English side was, shall we say. For example, on the English side, we had to order a drink every half an hour to stay in the bar, and the prices were also a little bit inflated. Whereas the Japanese side, it was one drink every hour, and the prices were cheaper as well. Maybe that's just Golden Guy in Shinjuku, but that's something to watch out for as well. And unfortunately, there's not really much you can do there if you can't speak Japanese. But obviously, that's not as serious as the other scams. And if you guys have ever encountered a scam like this on your travels around Japan, let us know in the comments. Share your experience, whether it's these scams or any others. We'll be keen to hear them and hopefully prevent this from ever happening again when Japan does reopen. But for now, guys, as always, many thanks for watching the Abroad in Japan channel. Check out the Abroad in Japan podcast in the description box below. And as for me, well, all this talk of cults and biscuits has made me pretty hungry. I'd bloody love some biscuits. Where's a cult when you need one? Huh.